DJ PK, it's 97.5, The Zone. We just heard from PK as the doors are opening in Allegiant Stadium. They'll be live in the next segment, Big 12 Media Days, all day long here on The Zone. The Cougars talk today. We played some of the Utes for you earlier, wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to hear Junior Tafuna, Karini Reed, Cam Rising, Brant Keithy, Kyle Whittingham, get the first hour of this morning's show. We replayed all of those. You can listen to them all right here on The Zone for all you Ute fans. Cougar fans, stick around. They're coming up later today. Right now, PK with a guy who got caught in the transition as the Pac-12 falls apart and teams scatter to different leagues. Yogi Roth covered the Pac-12, covered it well, knew the coaches, knew the players, loved having him on the show. He's launched a new media endeavor as the Pac-12 network no longer exists. Here's Yogi Roth with PK.
For over a decade, I considered you the foremost Pac-12 expert, ask you anything about football in the conference, and you had an opinion and an answer. So what's a guy from Venice who is a Pac-12 expert doing in Las Vegas at the Big 12 meetings?
Well, number one, thanks for having me on again. I love talking to you and love your community. I mean, that was, when I think back of 12 years at the Pac-12 network, I feel like I get to watch Utah's growth throughout the whole thing and really feel connected to the fan base and the people and the coaches and the players. It's been an amazing experience. So, number one, I couldn't say goodbye to Utah. I got to follow you. I'm on the train, baby. But also Pac-12 Media Day. They're going to have a really cool event tomorrow night, which will be Wednesday night. It's going to be called After Hours with the Cougs and Beeps.
Nice.
And it's going to be 90 minutes with the head coaches. There's 4 greats coming in: Jack Thompson, Ryan Leaf, Steven Jackson, TJ Hushmanzada.
Oh, wow.
And then we're going to talk to 4 players, and then Teresa Gould, the commissioner of the Pac-12. So we wanted to reimagine Pac-12 Media Days. I think for, probably one of the first times, or, not that often people went to Media Days just to see those 2 schools.
Right.
But I think the whole country is actually rooting for those 2 schools now because they got screwed by nothing that they did. In fact, all they did was win. They were both ranked at one point in the top 15 last season. So we're going to be a part of that. I'm going to host and moderate that event. So I was like, well, let me come out a day early, see Big 12 Media Days. I relaunched my podcast. It's called Y Option, which is college football through the lens of the West Coast, which is going to still cover all these teams. So I wanted to come to Media Days, see what it was like with the Big 12 here in Allegiant, cover Mountain West, and then, of course, to the Pac-12.
So this new podcast, or relaunching it, you're saying, I got the email on it. When's it start and how many episodes a week, a month, whatever you're doing?
Yeah, so you got the email. So we just started. Episode 1 and 2 is a 2-part with Mike Yam, your friend, and Ashley Adamson. Sure, and we go into like the beginnings of the Pac-12 networks in part 1, and then we go into the end of the Pac-12 networks in part 2, and it's super emotional. Like you and anybody who's followed those 2 and myself and the journey of the Pac-12 networks, I think will feel really connected because we go there and we talk about Mike and in the pandemic when he wasn't re-signed and how that just impacted all of us emotionally. It was therapeutic. It was beautiful. And then we're going to do 2 episodes a week. So I've already done, I think, 11, 12. We had Khalil Tate on, just interviewed Pete Carroll. Like, we got a bunch of that will come throughout the course of training camp. And then I'll be rolling at training camp, and then it'll be the season. So twice a week during the season we'll be there. The newsletter, I'll pen something every week because I love writing and connecting to fans through the medium of Substack. But it's easy to find. It's yoption.com, and away we go.
And available wherever you get your podcasts.
Everywhere, yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say it's an addiction for you, but it's something you had to keep doing.
Yeah, I think when I saw USC and UCLA leave, your spidey senses go up, and I've got 2 young kids, and I haven't felt the stress of, okay, where's my next job going to be? So I jumped at this thing early. So I was interviewing at places and kind of putting feelers out, and hopefully going to land something. But throughout that process, as I was talking to all these coaches last season and athletic directors and fans, I said, where are you going to, create content? Where are you going to have and celebrate the voices of your team and your programs? And a lot of times the answer was, we don't know. And I said, all right, well, if I'm going to land as a broadcaster, I'm probably going to land with one of these networks. They're only going to cover a handful of these teams, right? ESPN doesn't cover the Big Ten. Fox doesn't cover the ACC. So in my brain, I was like, well, I still want to talk about Cal and Utah and Arizona and USC and Washington State, all in different leagues. Mm-hmm. So I thought to myself, well, how could I do it? And as I brainstormed, I called up Jim Thornby, a longtime producer, close friend, and said, I have this idea. What if we created a show that was college football through the lens of the West Coast? So when we talk about Utah, it's from the lens of where I sit now. And when I talk about Michigan, and when I talk about Alabama and Central Florida, Cincinnati, all these new opponents achievements in the Big 12 is from the lens of the West Coast. And I was like, there's white space. There's an opportunity there. So we launched it. The feedback has been beautiful and humbling, and really grateful for it. And I didn't want to stop talking about these teams that I've really grown to love.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, and your knowledge of them just is really, as I say, it's unparalleled of what you know and what you can disseminate information-wise. You still did the spring games. I don't know how many you did, but you still did some because the conference was still together during the spring ball, even though we knew that they were going to the Big 12. So you have current knowledge based on what you saw and what you know. And I want to run through a few teams, obviously starting with Utah. They're pick number 1. You saw them spring, and spring ball is, it's a little bit of watered down, but you go beyond that. You know more knowledge just simply than what they show in vanilla approaches. So I think you're eminently qualified to give an opinion onto the level of talent and what the expectation is for Utah.
Yeah, well, I'll say this. I was at Utah Pitt Fiesta Bowl in 2004.
So was I.
Yeah, and it was a beautiful night for you and a miserable night for me. But with that said, I feel like I've been following Utah. I mean, I called Jordan Wynn when he was playing quarterback. I called Utah at Iowa State back in probably 2009 or 2010 or whatever it was. So I've been around this team for a long time. I've been in a bunch of practices. And for whatever it's worth, in the Thursday practice I went to before the spring game, in the hour of true competitive drills, and I told this to Coach Whittingham afterwards, I said I've never seen a more efficient, more explosive, and more talented Utah team than I just witnessed in the last hour, specifically on offense.
Right.
And I feel like every year the question has been the receiver. I feel like that's not as much as it was. You know they're going to run the ball. You know they're going to be physical. Cam and Brand and all the experience they have returning. Not surprised they were picked to win this league. I think Arizona's going to be a really talented team, too. I wouldn't be shocked if one of those two were in the Big 12 championship. How funny would it be? How fun would it be?
Well, that'd be fun, yeah.
Well, why not?
Maybe not Arizona, since I'm an ASU guy, but I get your point.
Yeah, that's true. I love Kenny. It'd be fun to see them take a run, too. I don't think they'll finish 15th or where they were picked last. 16th, yeah. I don't see that happen. I'd bet money on that. But, yeah, overall, I think Utah has a chance to make a lot of noise. I'd be disappointed if they're not in the playoff, to be blunt, this year, if they can remain healthy. I don't know if they're as talented all around like they were in 18 or 19 when they had all those gifted players on defense with Jalen Johnson and Julian and Bradley and I
mean, those are all NFL guys.
All NFL guys, but I do think this team's really talented. And I think that they're going to roll into this league, and people are going to have to adjust to Utah. Utah's not going to have to adjust to anybody else.
The receiver you bring up, that it's like a yearly thing. We talk about it sports radio every year, and we keep waiting. And I got to admit, I saw what Singer did down in Tucson, but then I saw what he did and didn't do at SC, and I feel like it's a little bit of a Charlie Brown and Lucy deal here, where Charlie runs up to the ball and then Lucy pulls it away with the receivers. If you think it's different this year, why?
Well, I think for Dorian, and I don't know him dramatically well, but I do know this. When you go from a walk-on to a star to then go into the LA market in the NIL culture that we live in, and you don't have success as a team or individually, those things combined do not allow anybody to maximize their potential. I mean, I think NIL is beautiful, and it's changing people's lives and their families' lives, but there's also a pressure associated with it.
No question.
And especially at SC, and I've covered that team probably, I hope, as well as anybody in America, you could feel it. I called a bunch of their games last year. It was a bunch of practice. You could kind of feel like the pressure sometimes in that environment can be a little too much. And I say that now coming out of it, I think you'll learn a lot on the back end. And from watching Dorian in practice or talking to people within the facility, he's the best version of himself now because of the things he went throughout his career, the success, the adversity, etc. So I think he's a true game breaker, but I also think the depth and breadth of this receiving core is so much better than years past. Let's go to the Rose Bowl when Brant was down and then Dalton was down, and you're thinking, all right, who's going to make a play for us, right? And you were hoping Solomon Enos would make a play, or some of these guys, but there just wasn't the depth there. Now I look at it and say, okay, it's not an offense that just runs through Brant Keithy. This is an offense that just runs efficiently, and there's a variety of weapons, and that's what I noticed in practice when I watched Cam playing quarterback and not just feeding the ball through one player or a player being apex of a route combination. And Andy Lowe is as creative as anybody in America. So I'm bullish on this group. Do they have a first rounder at wideout? I don't want to put a ceiling on anybody, but I don't know if I see that when I go to practice. But God, I do think that they've got talent much deeper than they've had in the past.
How about running back? Because usually if you look back under Kyle's tenure, he's got a great running back, and most of the time that running back is an NFL guy. And when we get to August and training camp starts, we pretty much have an idea who it is. Now, there's been a couple of times that hasn't worked, but yet then he still finds somebody, takes Joe Williams literally out of the stands, and he runs for 350 or 30 yards against UCLA. And then we see Jaquinton Jackson, who Ludwig told me was as talented as anybody he'd ever coached. Now, he took off to Arkansas. Do you think that they've got somebody that can step forward in the manner that we've seen Utah running backs do for so many years?
Yeah, I mean, number one, you have to look any further than the offensive line coach. Everything Coach Harding has done there, to me, sets a tone and a tempo. So here's my comp. When I watched the Denver Broncos back in the day, right, this is Alex Gibbs for all the football nerds out there. It was the outside zone running scheme, right? This is just something they've just committed to. When you look at Utah's run game, they've been committed to a scheme for, how long has Coach Harding been there? 12, 13 years now.
Yeah.
He's been there for a long time. They're committed to a scheme. And then when you watch the backs run, can they hit a crease? Yes. Do they have a home run back? Yes. Do they have a power back? I think so. Can Mekhi Bernard do a lot of different things? Yes. So I of all positions on a team, usually running back's one I worry about the least. Mm-hmm. And I'd say the same thing for Utah, because I really like this offensive line. I think they're 8-9 deep. They were impressive being there. You know Cam's going to get him in the right play. You know you have to pay attention to a tight end, so it's going to force teams to play a certain style of personnel defensively. And if the Wildcats can do what we just referenced, they're going to run the ball. I mean, Utah's not going to come out and throw it 50 times a game because they want to be in the Big 12 and play in like an air raid league per se, historically. Like, they're going to come out and move the ball, be explosive, but also have an attitude about them, because that's what wins. That's what Kyle has proven to do.
It's crazy to think they've been so good at tight end, and I think collectively this batch might be the best.
Yeah, oh my God, I'm just watching Landon, and you look at the body types of these players, watching them in spring. If I was coming back for training camp, the first thing I'd want to do is get to practice early and watch guys come out with maybe not their pads on, just to see some of the physicality of this group. And then when I think of Andy Ludwig, I mean, you go back and study him, the personnel groupings are vast. The formations and shifts and motions are aplenty. And that's what gives defensive coordinators the biggest challenges. And then you add in a quarterback who can run. I mean, this offense, with the efficiency and mastery that Cam Rising has, they should not have a lot of self-inflicted wounds as the season goes on. I mean, they should be an offense that is as efficient as any in America. I think they should complete a dramatic amount of their passes. Like, I just watch them and I'm like, they know where to go with the ball. I don't think there's going to be a lot of looks that are going to be confusing this offense. So the challenge will be, just like we had it when I was at SC, or any top-tier team has it, is can you come in focused every week? And when I look at those helmets and you look at some logos that may be down and you play them, can you come in and when you look at Cincinnati in your brain, can you say, you know what, that's a team that was in the playoff 2 years ago. This is a program that's really well coached. That's going to be the challenge. The veteran leadership is going to have to pull up some of these inexperienced players that have a lot of talent as they enter this new conference.
Arizona changes coaches, right? They had a great season, which led to him obviously getting the Washington job. They bring in Brennan, who's been doing pretty good work in an underfunded, utilized program over there in San Jose. I like the hire over the long term because I think he'll want to stay there and he won't necessarily be looking. And I think Fish had a foot out the door when he got successful, and it proved to be true. So I think Brennan will have success over, however long he stays there. But I'm wondering, how much do you think this year a coaching change will impact it? Not necessarily positively, but maybe negatively, or do you think it's just neutral?
No, I think it's going to be a net positive at Arizona. I think what Jed did was phenomenal. I mean, that was a bad state of a program when he arrived. And it's hard to say that, I think, in college football. Like, it was a challenging environment. And he got them to be playing as well as anybody, you could argue, top 15 in America.
Oh, at the end of the season, no doubt.
No doubt. I mean, I called that Utah game where, it was a wrap from the beginning. A lot of reasons why, but Arizona was dramatically talented, and they still are. For Brent Brennan, I've known this guy for 15 years. I think he's as good of a culture builder as you're going to find on the West Coast. Okay, why? You referenced the Mountain West. You referenced San Jose State. When he was there, so many times his best players could have left. portal era, get paid era, and they said no. I'm talking 2 best defensive linemen in 2021. No, we're going to stay. We're going to be part of this thing because we just won the league. We love the culture. Brent also goes to work at that. After they won the league in 2020, he went around and met with guys like Phil Jackson, Pete Carroll, like guys who have won and had sustained success for a long period of time. So he knows what he's doing. Like, I wasn't shocked when he got there and the players decided to stay, because of the community that he's going to create among his staff, among the facility. So will they win 11, 12 games? I don't know. I think their schedule's pretty challenging. I think Utah, K-State back-to-back. So it won't be easy for them, but I don't think that it's a net negative at all. I think it's going to be a net positive. I think you're right. He's going to be there for a long time. Dick Tomey was one of his biggest mentors. Yeah. I mean, the story fits well for him to be the head coach at Arizona.
It does. Yeah, it does. I thought it was a good hire. And you bullish on Dillingham. You know, I follow the program close. It seems like they went from no momentum to some. Now, if you've got momentum and there's 100% of it, I'm not sure is it 25, is it 50, but it does seem like it's trending in the right direction. I don't know what that means for victories this year, but I think he's going in the right spot.
Well, I felt this, if the Pac-12 was still existing today, I would have said if I was a high school recruit and I want to live in a warm weather, metropolitan environment, or I can drive or have a short flight from Southern California to my school, it'd be ASU, right? And ASU, I thought, had a chance in the, call it 10-team league Pac-12, if that's what it was when USC and UCLA dipped out. If that was this year, I think ASU had a great chance to rebuild. When I look at these helmets to our right here in this beautiful stadium, I say they still have the same thing. Metropolitan environment, great weather, really great communication school, NIL opportunities. Like, it's a pro city. Like, they're still selling the same thing. So I'm with you. I'm really bullish on it. I love the staff. Huge fan of Marcus Arroyo, the hire that they just made. Kenny Dillingham, I think in year 2. To me, I kind of consider it year 1.
Yeah,
because it was such a challenge last year. I mean, think about the UCLA game when they're running that offense with 3 offensive linemen, and they just had to do anything just to survive. Right. Now I think they're operational. And then I think the year after this is when you could see them kind of hit a stride. Because I do think that they've always been called the sleeping giant, probably from back in the day when you were there, right?
Yeah.
And I think now in this new league, they'll have an opportunity to be that. I really think that the way they're raising money, the way they're recruiting, people want to be around him and what they're doing on both sides of the ball. I really like the staff. So, yeah, I'm on it. I don't think they finished last in this league. I don't know who voted for that, but I would dramatically disagree with that statement. I think it'll surprise some people this year.
I don't know what to think of Colorado. I mean, I got nothing more beyond that. I just don't know what to think.
Yeah, they're hard because you don't know really what's going on in the program because they put out a ton of content, but they're curating a lot of the content, which is fine. That's cool. I think Shador is really talented. I know there's a lot of debate around that. I think he's really gifted. I think he's the best quarterback that I've seen in 20 years covering Colorado to play or practice on that practice facility. I mean, he can deal, he can anticipate, he's an on-rhythm passer, he's hyper-competitive, his teammates seem to love him, so I'm in on that part of it. The other part of it is I just think certain things in football still ring true, which is teams have to come together. And another year with another influx of players, another group of players depart from that program. Like, will they get to 6 wins? Maybe. But I don't see them as a threat entering year 1 in this league. But I'll still tune in. Like, I'm really intrigued to watch them. They have the best player you could argue in the country in Travis Hunter. Yeah. He's just a freak. He's so gifted. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see where they go. Probably a good fit for them in this league. When you look at where they came from, they didn't have a ton of success in the Pac-12.
Right, they went first.
Yeah, I mean, they were the team that was always picked pretty much to be last. Even the year they won the South, they were picked last.
Yeah.
So
it's funny you say that about the influx of guys coming and going, because talking to the BYU coaches, they said that in this offseason that they underestimated because they brought in so many guys the year before, coming off a couple of good seasons, that they felt like the lack of continuity, familiarity, all these types of things negatively impacted their team. And that's something you got to be careful then how many guys you bring in, because you just can't bring in everybody and their dog, because it just doesn't work that way.
Well, I'd say the same thing with SC. They hit lightning in a bottle year 1 with a bunch of new transfer players, new staff, and the best player in the world, and Caleb Williams. Year 2, similar approach, especially in the offensive line, and they really struggled. And I just think there's something to recruiting and identifying in high school and developing and then supplementing. The challenge is that when new coaches come in, they think, well, we can win fast because SC was on the brink of the CFP. Yeah. Let's just flip the whole roster. Or as a coach, you're like, we have the opportunity to flip a roster. Why wouldn't we get rid of everybody, bring a bunch of new people in? But when those new players come in and only have 1 or 2 years, it's really hard, I think, to pull that thing together, especially if you don't win. Yeah. And it's so hard in year 1 to win. Like, let's just look at this league, what K-State has done. That thing is rock solid. What Sonny has done at TCU, rock solid. Iowa State, like, there's rock solid cultures. So if you come into a new league and you're like, all right, let's just get a bunch of the best players from around the country or a bunch of players that we think will be really talented, you're already behind the 8 ball. It's not like you're rolling against teams that have done the same thing. That's what Colorado felt last year.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm curious to see how they shake out. I bet they learned a lot from last year in terms of, there were cameras everywhere. There was so much attention on them. And they were more, you got to give them credit. They were way more competitive than they'd been in recent years.
No doubt.
I mean, they were in tight games.
Yeah.
But I'll be curious how it shakes out for them. I think it's an easier path to a bowl game in this league than in their previous one, for sure.
Okay, as you know, I've got hundreds of thousands of listeners every morning, so tell us again about your new podcast.
Well, number one, thanks for having me on for all those listeners. Yeah, yoption.com is where you can find it. We created this concept, which is college football through the lens of the West Coast. We titled it Y Option. You'll appreciate this. It's like one of the greatest plays in the history of the West Coast offense. Mm-hmm. 2 is a lot of fan bases that were coming from the Pac-12. They were looking for options. Where are we going to hear about our teams? Where are we going to tell our stories? And then for me, I had to figure out my options too. So as I went to work, I said, you know what? There's a world where I kind of want to create and own something, to be a part of something that I get to make creative decisions on. Brought on Jim Thornby, who's my partner in this thing, which is really cool. And we get to really celebrate the game through thoughtful dialogue about college football through this lens of where we live. All too often the stories are coming from other regions. They don't really know this part of the country.
Right.
So we're going to push them. We'll be bullish, but we'll be fact first, opinion second. We won't scream. It'll be conversational. So I'll be doing that all week long. Check it out, yoption.com, and then I'll be on your TVs. Unfortunately, I won't be in Salt Lake calling games there. I wish I was, but I'll be watching all of them for sure.
There's Yogi Roth with PK in Las Vegas. It'll be interesting to see how this works for Yogi. I mean, the media is clearly evolving. It's changing big time. What's the right way to go? What's going to work? Nobody knows for sure. Everybody's trying different things. And I just don't think there's any one thing. I think the term that's definitely getting lost here is broadcasting. Try narrow casting. Try niche casting. You find your niche, then you try to grow it. The whole broadcasting thing, that works for the NFL. and a few big events, a handful of big college football games and the Olympics. And, there's a few big events that bring us all together. But find your niche, Yogi. Get in that lane and make it work. I do think the point they said about Colorado's point on, nobody really knows. The one thing I do notice is that schedule's backloaded. The last 3 games for Colorado are Utah, Kansas, and Oklahoma State. Get them off to a good start. If they can't win at the start of the year, then that's a them problem. I don't know why they scheduled North Dakota State. That seems difficult. Then they're at Nebraska and CSU. The league tried to give them games at Baylor and UCF out of the gate. If you can't beat Baylor and UCF, if you can't get bowl eligible, that's a you problem. Kansas State and Arizona in October are good tests. Utah, Kansas, and Oklahoma State to end the year? Yikes. Be bowl eligible when you get to November because it gets really hard then, Colorado. When we come back, live to Las Vegas, Allegiant Stadium, the Big 12 Media Days, Day 2 getting underway. Stay with us.